Hello, Ken. This is Greg. It's Tuesday, January the 18th, year 2022. And our school has gone to remote learning this week. I am at school. Teachers are supposed to be at school and conduct all their classes online for this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We were off yesterday for Martin Luther King Jr. birthday. But so I'm not sure how long my lessons are going to be. I only meet with my class for about a half an hour. We discuss a few things. I give them work to do. But today we did read chapter 7 today, which is a fairly interesting chapter for me. During that chapter, every year, I always ask a particular question, and no student is ever able to give me an answer. And I'll give you the question before I leave today, but I'm not going to tell you the answer as well. I spent some time over the weekend. I came in Saturday, Sunday, whatever day it was. I came in and I was tired of seeing my own handwriting on the board, so I made everything real neat and nice. And just as a way of review, I'm sure you remember all this anyway, but this is what the book's about. You know, it has the setting, the time and the place setting, the South in general, the place, Alabama in particular. Time setting is the Great Depression. The main literary relationships in this book are three: political, who has power and who doesn't. The second one is class, the relationship between classes and the friction between classes. And then social, and that's how people relate to their neighbors. I haven't discussed this with my class, but whenever I come to this one, how people relate to their neighbors, I'm reminded of the story of the Good Samaritan in the Bible. A guy trying to trip up Jesus, he said, "And just who is my neighbor?" And Jesus told him the story of the Good Samaritan. And, he ended the story with which one was a neighbor, a friend to his neighbor. And that's what this reminds me, especially with this book. Who are my neighbors? How do I treat my neighbors? And of course, you've read the book before, so you know how people treat each other, particularly Tom Robinson and the blacks in the book. Of course, it's about segregation. The book is about segregation and racism. The terms separate but equal, and then the Jim Crow laws. I haven't had my students do research on civil rights yet or Jim Crow laws, but that's going to be an assignment of theirs before the end of the book. They had to do one on the Great Depression already, which we haven't got through those yet. Again, these are the bookends to the story. The very first sentence of the story, Harper Lee says Jim broke his arm, however old he was, 11 years old, 10, however old he was. He broke his arm at the elbow. And we go all the way through the book until the very end of the book, where they're out in the, walking home from the Halloween party or the pageant or whichever one it was that night. It wasn't a Halloween party, I don't think, but walking home from the pageant where Scout was dressed as a ham. And it's not till the very end of the book do we get the bookend for that statement of the very first sentence in the book. He breaks his arm at the elbow, and we find out how he breaks his arm at the elbow. And then also inside that, a bookend within a bookend, of course, is Boo Radley coming out. And we've talked the last couple of times about Jim's and Dill's obsession with Boo Radley. They just can't, they have to see him. Their world will not be complete until they see Boo Radley. Until at least they see him, but they would like for him to come out of his house as well. The last couple stories we've had where they tied the note to the end of the fishing line, and they were trying to get it in through the shutter, at the Radley house. And then last time around, it's when Jim and Scout and Dill tried to sneak up at nighttime and look in the Radley house so they could get a view of Boo himself. And then how Nathan Radley fired a shotgun, and all the neighbors gathered around, and Jim showed up without his pants, and Dill concocted this story that I don't think any of the adults believed, that Jim had lost his pants playing strip poker, with Jim. But anyway, that's all an attempt on Jim's and Dill's part to have Boo Radley come out. They just, it's, again, I don't know what other word to use. It's just an obsession with them and how they want to get him to come out. I made a note for myself this weekend, and I haven't talked to the kids about it yet, but I will probably tomorrow, and I just want to run it by you. About the stories that have originated about Boo Radley, and how Miss Stephanie Crawford made up a bunch of stuff, and how a lot of it is just concoctions from the minds of kids, little kids, preteen kids, like Jim, and how Boo Radley stands 6.5 feet tall, and he's got fangs, he's got a big scar across his face, and what he eats is squirrels and cats. He eats them raw. And he's got blood on his hands. He's never going to be able to get the blood off his hands, because when you eat an animal raw like that, the blood supposedly never comes off, according to the stories. But anyway, the comment I wanted to make on this, and I want my students to understand, I'm sure you'll understand it quickly, is that how amazing it is that when people don't understand something, they don't have the full story about something, such as this, what do people do? People think they need to have an explanation. They need to know why something is the way it is, or why it isn't the way something isn't. So what do people do when they don't know the real story? They make up something. They just concoct a story that will satisfy them, and then that now becomes the real story. I don't teach high school English anymore, but in junior English, we always taught American literature, which I just absolutely love. But it starts out from the first Indian stories, Native American stories. And if you know any Native American stories or Native American history, their whole culture is filled with stories that try to bring explanation for things they do not understand. Like the flood, or the creation of people, or why people act the way they do, because they have spirit guides and stuff like that. But anyway, and it's not just Native Americans who do that. People I know still do this today. They don't understand why something is the way it is, or how it works, or whatever. So in their minds, they think they're reasoning it out, and what they end up doing is inventing a story that will give explanation, because we crave explanation for things. And, like you, I've been to church for a long, long time. And some of the stories I've heard people make up, I'm thinking, that's not in the Bible. You just made that up. That's totally, it fits your theology, but it's not biblical. It's not scriptural. And I'm sure you know people like that as well. And we've probably been that way ourselves. At least I have. Thank God I got better revelation, better light at times. All right, the next thing I did, again, this is a review of the class structure in the South, particularly at the time of this book. You have upper, middle, and lower class in town. These are all white people. The upper class are the townspeople, the middle class are the farmers, and the lower class are people like the Ewells. Now, I gotta tell you something. I came up with this on my own, and I got a pleasant surprise later in the book, and I'll explain it to you when we get there. But from reading this book numerous times, year after year, I came up with this conclusion to myself. And it just so turns out that I believe it's right. Okay? But below them, you have the blacks. And I got the arrow, got the nice diagram here. No white person is going to cross that imaginary line. No black person's going to cross the imaginary line. And I put down here on the bottom, I don't know if you can see it all, at no time would a white person cross that social line with blacks and give a black person an idea that they were equals with a white person. Same way, at no time would a black person be permitted, even if they wanted to, but they wouldn't, would they be permitted to cross that social line with whites and give the black person an idea that they were equal with whites. All right, so I've done a little just revamping my boards to make it look like, right? Two climaxes of this story, and this is, I had it drawn by hand on my board, but it was ugly. Atticus Finch, Tom Robinson, and the Ewells. There's two climaxes. This is the first one. Obviously, it's in the courtroom where Atticus and Tom Robinson and the Ewell family, Bob and Mayella in particular, they all clash. They meet there, and that's the first climax. And then the story goes on a little bit longer, and at the very end we have the second climax, and this is between the Finches. This is Atticus and Jim and Scout, along with Bob Ewell and then Boo Radley, where they meet in the woods, and Boo Radley saves the kids' lives. And so that's the second climax to this story. So if you just kind of keep that in mind, you realize this is what we're shooting for first, or driving towards first, and that is ultimately what we're driving for. But that doesn't mean anything without this, as you know. Let's see. I'll get back to that other one. We read chapter 7 today in our online meet. And what happened in chapter 7 today was that Jim and Scout collected a lot of items out of the trunk of the tree, the knothole in the oak tree at the edge of the Radley yard. And they got the medal, and they got the pocket watch with the knife, and they got the string, and they got a whole pack of gum, and I'm not sure if they got anything else. But anyway, they got a number of things out of that knothole. And one day, if you remember, they decided to write a note to whoever was leaving those things for them. And they ran down there, Jim ran down there to put the letter in the knothole, and when he got there, the knothole had been filled in with cement. And Nathan Radley had filled it in because he told the kids that the tree was diseased, it was dying. And you put the cement in there, and it keeps it alive for a while. Well, they didn't believe that it was dying. They asked Atticus, is it dying? He said, no, it looks healthy. And finally Atticus said, look, leave Mr. Radley's trees to himself. He knows more about his trees than anyone else. At the very end of this chapter today, I'll just get my book and I'll just look at it here. This is the question that I left my class with today. In fact, I posed a question online for them. They have to have it answered by tomorrow by the time we get to class. And I want to see what kind of answer they come up with. I've never had a class that has figured out what I'm asking here, has never figured out the correct answer. And one of the reasons, the main reason why they've never figured it out, because it just doesn't say in the book this is why he was crying. They have to make a couple of inferences as to why, why Jim was crying at the end. All right, this is Atticus talking to the kids. He says, well, maybe the tree is sick or dying. I'm sure Mr. Radley knows more about his trees than we do. Atticus left us on the porch. Jim leaned on a pillar, rubbing his shoulders against it. Do you itch, Jim? I asked as politely as I could. He did not answer. Come on in, Jim, I said. After a while, Jim stood there until nightfall, and I waited for him. So Jim just stared out there looking around. When we went in the house, I saw that Jim had been crying. His face was dirty in the right places, but I thought it odd that I had not heard him crying. The question I left with my students today as we departed, and as I put as a homework question to answer online, is why was Jim crying? And again, the book doesn't tell us outright why he is crying, but I've got a logical answer for it, and this is the answer I look for every year, and the answer I never ever get. And I'm not going to even tell you. You can send me a message or a text or whatever you think the answer is. You can look back in the chapter if you want to. There are a couple of clues that I found as I was reading the book today to my students. There are a couple of clues that I think are very logical. They could be wrong, but as to give us an answer why Jim is crying. I have a definite reason why I think Jim was crying. And again, I'll let you think about it. You might already know the answer. I don't know. I'll let you think about it. You can give me an answer. You can send an answer to me, whatever. And I'll see what you have to say. Unrelated to this, I want to go back. There's something that I talked about to my students today in class. About when they left. In the first of this chapter, Jim tells Scout the story that when he went back to the Radley house and he went to the fence, his pants were folded over the fence. And then he went on to tell her a little bit later, they weren't just folded over the fence. You know, he had ripped them when he was trying to get out. They were sewn back together rather crudely. And I think Scout even said, as if someone was expecting you back. So I asked the kids this. I think, to me, the answer is extremely obvious, that it was Boo Radley who put them over there, and he's the one who sewed them up as well. I asked my students today who they thought it was that put the pants over the fence, and I got 3 different answers. 2 of them I thought were rather unique, anyway, strange. But I had a few kids that answered Boo Radley. I had some kids that said Atticus had done it. Remember what we were talking about the other day, Atticus's method for dealing and raising his kids, his children, and how he might have gotten them, put them over the, after Scout and Jim and Dill had left, Atticus may have gone to the back of the Radley yard, saw Jim's pants, put them over there, give Jim a chance to retrieve them so he wouldn't get in trouble. I told my students, I said, that's a good explanation, but I don't think that's the right one. And I didn't tell them I didn't think it was the right one. And then Nathan Radley, I guess you could say the same thing. He didn't want necessarily the kids to get in trouble, so he went back there and saw the pants. He could have pulled them out, and he could have folded them over the fence as well. All right, if the pants had just been folded, I could really buy into either Atticus or Nathan Radley doing it. But since they were sewn back together, and rather crudely, like you would picture Boo Radley doing, that kind of persuades me, almost unpersuadable otherwise, that it was Boo who left the pants there. And of course, we're getting into Miss Maudie's fire here real soon as well, and him putting a blanket around Scout during the fire and stuff. And you can come up with, you don't have to give me an answer for that one, but I really would like to know your thoughts on why you think Jim was crying at the end of this chapter today. All right? So I'm going to get out of here, and like I said, I'll still keep on doing these on daily, even though we're not officially at school. We've had a big outbreak of COVID here, and we've had a lot of kids come down with cases of it, and they just decided, correctly, I might add, that we're just going to be on remote learning to keep everybody out of everybody else's. We're at this Omicron, which apparently you can get just by looking at the word Omicron. You can contract it. I've got some people, a lot of close people here over the weekend have contracted as well. We had a number of cases Friday, and then we came up with more cases here at school Friday after school, and we came up with a lot more cases on Saturday. We've been running shorthanded on staff anyway. And our local health department came out with a statement yesterday. They're expecting the peak within the next 7 to 10 days, and then it's going to drop off dramatically. And that's what I'm hoping for. I really am. So I don't like not being in person in school. It's just not the same. The kids don't get the same. You have to fight sometimes to get kids here at school and stuff. So anyway, that's where we stand right now. Again, I'll have another one tomorrow for you. And I hope you're doing better today than you were yesterday, and better tomorrow than you are today. I'll see you tomorrow, Ken.